Yeah, welcome everybody to our webinar this afternoon, which is really about getting the most from coaching supervision. So you'll be hearing from myself, Damien Wanfor, and my colleague Monica Ross. You can
Hi everyone.
And we're both supervisors on our coach training courses. We both work as executive coaches as well as coach trainers. So in terms of the session today, we're going to try and make this as an interactive session as much as we can. It's obviously a topic that we're very, very passionate about in terms of how we can support coaches to get the most out of coaching supervision. And in terms of housekeeping, the session will be recorded in case anybody wants to watch it at a later date. Feel free to add any comments or questions in the chat panel, which hopefully you can see in terms of your controls. And we will be asking you to place some comments on there at certain times as well. I think the only other thing I'd say about these sessions is, in terms of applications, other applications you may have open, usually closing those down doesn't just support your presence and sort of being here for this session, but also it just stops any problems with the transmission speed in terms of slowing down voices, etc. So you may want to close down any other applications as well. I'd also always recommend having a pen and paper handy, just in case there's any sort of reflections that you want to take as we're working through the session today as well. So Monica and I have sort of constructed an idea of how we'd like to run this session, but of course, we're coming from a place of not assuming we know the level of experience in the core and what you're personally wanting to get from this session, a bit like what you want to get from supervision. So we will be sort of trying to engage you in this process of really helping you think about what you want to get from the session in a short while as well. But Monica and I are really focused on I suppose developing coaches' emotional intelligence as well as their skill set. So part of this is our ability to be present for our clients. So just to role model that again, I'm just going to invite Monica just to take us through a very short grounding exercise just to help us all get present for the session today.
Thanks, Damien. So again, welcome to everyone. Even though I can't see you, I'm feeling connected to you. And also to the people who will be listening in afterwards, I want to welcome you too. And because you've come from other things that you've probably been doing already today, and you may well have things on your mind that you're going to after this. This is to bring us into presence together in this moment so that you get the most out of the session. And this is something I often use with clients, whether it's individual or group, to really arrive together. So I'm going to invite you, if you're sitting, to kind of shimmy forward a little bit on your seat and make good contact between your feet and the ground. And I can see Damien is doing the same, and so am I. And if you're standing, just make good contact between your feet and the ground and begin to breathe up your spine so that your spine becomes more upright and you can see your posture immediately begins to change. And I'm calling this collecting self, and it comes from a mixture of embodied leadership and some of the other energy practices that I have. So we begin, first of all, by connecting in with your center, your gut, just around your belly button. In Japanese, it's called the Dantien, and it's our place of power and confidence. So just beginning to connect in there, you might put your hand on around your belly area. I'm going to invite you into a sort of a visualization. What if my center were like a mountain, stable, strong, resilient, able to withstand whatever comes, solid. And moving up into your heart, collecting your heart into this space. And you might want to put your hand on your heart area. What if my heart were like the ocean, deep, containing, life-enhancing, calm at the depths, even when the surface is agitated. And moving up into your head, into your mind. What if my mind were like the night sky? Vast, silent, still, full of possibilities beyond our capacity to understand, with resources and answers arriving in the silence like twinkling stars, just when they're needed. And coming into this space with your head, your heart, and your gut open, receptive, and ready to receive whatever it is you would like to gain from this session. So just from that energy, connect in with yourself and take a moment to think about what is important for you here. What would be really useful for you to take away from this session? And when you have something, just share it with us in the chat box. Welcome.
Thanks, Monica.
It's a pleasure.
So we got sort of just sort of under 40 minutes today for the session. So, supervision often starts with questions that we may be holding about ourselves, about our work, about our clients, and it'd just be wonderful to see some questions coming through. So Monica and I can see the sort of, I suppose, the territory you would like us to move into in this conversation. So I can see a couple coming through there. From Peter, maximizing the time you spend in a supervision session to get the most value from it. And David, thank you for your question as well, to better understand the function and purpose of coaching supervision. Yeah, really, really important question. So it'd just be great if anybody else has got some other questions to come through, just so we can sort of see the sort of energy in terms of the group and where we need to go today. I'm just going to pause for a moment just to see if any other questions come in.
And by the way, there's no such thing as a question that isn't useful. So even if it feels like a naive question that you're holding, please feel free to share it. We're looking at all levels of experience and knowledge here.
Thank you. So I can see from down there, what should supervision look like? Again, it's a really good question. And from Paul, how would you describe or define your approach to supervision? Yeah, thank you, Paul. And again, Monica and I can talk about our approaches, and there are some sort of synergies, but again, there's some different approaches as well. And from Tony, what else can I do to get the most out of my one-to-one and group supervision? So yeah, good question, and let's talk about the differences between getting the most from the group and the most from the one-to-one. And from Robert, yeah, how to get the most from supervision. Okay, great, thank you. Some really good questions. So Monica, my sense is let's start with fundamental, really, in terms of what is supervision. I think that'd be a good place to start based on some of those questions.
So, yeah, I'm curious to know so far what all of you think supervision is. And, if you've already had experience of supervision, what is your definition, your own personal definition? And share that with us. And then I'm happy to jump in and give you, some definitions and also my sense, my stance on supervision. So I'd love to hear from your own experience, even, whatever that is, one-to-one or group. What do you think supervision is? So Anne, working on the stuff I'm carrying, lovely. Any more offerings? A sense check, yeah, on my coaching practice and unloading it. Yeah, Peter, thanks. A safe, reflective space to bring coaching issues and personal development issues. Yeah, getting rid of transference. Thanks, Robert. And Tony, a safe space to explore issues arising in my coaching practice. Yeah. We may be receiving supervision without knowing it. I believe it's a chance to check in on how I'm feeling about sessions and what my style, what else I could have explored. Lovely. So, Damien, how about we put up some of the definitions and I'll talk through them in a moment. Paul, you were my supervisor and you were great. Thank you. The calm space and chance to reflect. Thanks. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that hugely. So, these are some definitions, and I'm just going to invite you to, take a moment to allow them to land with you first, and then I'll talk a little bit. So if I start with the first one, the best interests of the coachee and the client are protected, and to provide educative and restorative support. I always think that I'm holding a big container, that I'm holding everybody, the coach, the client, and even the system of the client. There's another model you'll see later on when we're speaking, but it is about really holding a space for best practice and for the growth and the learning of everyone and the safety of everyone involved. And with Hawkins and Shoei, the whole idea that the awareness, the commitment to learning, and I love the idea of breathing, that there's a space where you come in and you're taking care of yourself. And self-care is a huge piece, which both Damien and myself are very passionate about, because we believe that, as coaches, we are the instrument of our work. And it's hugely important that we're resourced, and that by looking after ourselves in a safe space where we know we can grow and where somebody really is holding the space for us with great care, but also that they're willing to call us to account on the things that we want to be called to account on. And, to look after the ethical aspects, to be able to bring dilemmas or things that we don't yet know we don't know. And also the sense that, we're allowed to get it wrong, we're allowed to celebrate. So these are things, I'm already maybe describing my own stance as well. And Edna Murdoch's Who We Are is How We Coach. So really that personal sense of who are you as a coach? What's important in your learning? What are your values? How does that show up in your work? All of these are really important aspects of supervision. And I might add one more piece to that, which I always say when I'm working with individuals or groups, that my belief is that as a supervisor, I'm here to support you to develop your own internal supervisor. And what that means is the compass that we all have within ourselves of when we're doing good work and when there's something that, is just a little bit out of our awareness or our reach that we don't quite understand. And there's a model that I don't know, Damien, if you can call it up there for a moment. It comes from a lady called Maria Gilbert and a book with herself and Evans. And, it's an integrative model. It shows that what I was talking about, the supervisor holding a big container, and it's also the supervisor holding a systems perspective, that sometimes as supervisor, because I see, the bigger landscape, I can see the whole picture, and I can offer a new perspective that maybe the client who's stuck in the situation can't see so easily. And quite often I can see things in the system of the client. And what I find often is I can help to reframe in a positive way. I can support the client to see things differently through the supervisee, and even to bring positivity back into the client's system. So it's being able to help the coach to begin to develop their own meta perspective. So, and that's part of the reflection as well, part of the reflective learning. So, Damien, would you like to add anything into what I've said so far about, what your sense of supervision is and you as a supervisor?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, Monica. I think it's, there's so many dynamics at play in our work. If we take that sort of systemic view, it's not just about, as you're saying there, me and the client. You've got the client system, you've got wider impacts, you've got everything going on for the coachee, everything that's going on for the coach, and the supervisor really being able to help the coach learn from that. So there's sort of the learning partnership, I would say, in terms of supervision is so important. Being able to work with an experienced supervisor and an experienced coach, in terms of that sort of safe space is so important. And I think coming from working in a coaching consultancy for a long time, there are specific conversations that I would never want to have with my colleagues, and actually having a confidential space where I can go and make sense of who I am in my work is so important. Having a confidential space where I can talk about those development edges that I know that I'm confronted with sometimes when I'm working with certain clients, or perhaps there's a decision I need to make about whether I take a client on or not. Supervision provides me with a confidential space to work through that, so I can be at the best, my best with my clients.
And actually, I'll just add another small piece there that, my sense is that the supervisor is holding your integrity as a coach and trusting in your integrity. And so for me, with my own supervisor, I just feel that she knows where my intentions are and that she's holding her sense of me as being somebody who's doing their best and who sometimes feels vulnerable, who sometimes feels worn down. And we'll come to that in a moment, about the different aspects of supervision. So it's really important that, when you're choosing your supervisor, and we'll talk about this too, that you really build a relationship that's going to work for you, whether it's individual or group.
I agree. So should we just move on a bit, Monica, and perhaps talk a bit about why supervision? I mean, we've touched on some bits there, but I think just this defining what supervision is and the importance of it, I think could be a good step before we move into some of those other things around getting the most from supervision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I did just want to bring up our global code of ethics. So, professional body that I'm aligned to, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. This code is aligned with the AC as well. I think it's really important that we sort of think about what our expectations from our professional bodies in terms of our continuing professional development, and how supervision is part of that now. And I think it's wonderful now that we're growing up as a profession, and we're becoming more mature, and there are expectations that the client organizations that we may be working with now have of us in terms of our ongoing supervisory practice, and they will be asking questions around that. But at the same time, this offers a bit of a challenge because are we having supervision because we really see the benefits in it? Or are we having supervision because, for instance, at a certain level on the EMCC framework, I'm supposed to have 1 hour of supervision for every quarter? So I just decide I'm going to take the minimum amount, and tick a box. Because I think this whole webinar about getting the most out of supervision, I think is useful to reflect on our mindset around this in terms of what's the purpose for us of undertaking supervision. It's a bit like coaching, if we think about the coaching client, are they doing this because it's something they have to do, or are they doing this because they really experience the value? Are you going to say something, Monica?
I was going to add something that I found myself sharing with somebody some time ago, and it's that, the difference between going to supervision, which feels almost like, that it's being imposed on you and that you're kind of showing up, and being, participating in your supervision, being a real active learner and partner with your supervisor. So it's that difference of really committing to your learning and having a direction that you're working with, that your supervisor is holding with you.
Hmm. Thank you. And let's just drill down a bit more, and we will use Proctor's model, because this model is expressed often as a way of describing what supervision is and what we can, I suppose, the territory that we can work in. And maybe, Monica, I'm going to pause from time to time and see if we can offer some examples around this, just in terms of obviously anonymized clients that we may have experienced around this. So when we're talking about supervision, we often think of these three pillars. So there is a normative aspect of supervision, which is about our professional practice and quality assurance. So often when we think of the normative side of supervision, ethical dilemmas come up. So this idea of, perhaps a question that we're wrestling with around whether we should do something or something else. And actually having a space where we can explore that, because often they're not black and white, often they're shades of grey, can really support us in our work. So let me give you an example of an ethical dilemma that I supported a coach through. So this coach was an internal coach. She was an executive member of a corporate organization, and she had previously coached an individual in the organization about a year before, and he had approached her to move into a coaching relationship again, because he was thinking about moving role, and he wanted to work through that with a coach. So they recontracted, they started to undertake that work. And then after about 2 sessions, the organization went into a restructure, and this individual became a direct report of the executive. So he was one layer down. He was a team member of one of her direct reports. And she was very aware of her boundaries, and she had actually met with him and had a conversation around whether this was right for them to continue, and whether they both felt they could manage the boundary of being in coaching and being out in their everyday work. And they both had said that they felt that they could hold that. And yet she was still left with a bit of an itch around whether this was the right thing to do. And she came for supervision to work that through. Actually, as a result of the conversation, she realized that actually there was a boundary issue here, and therefore she disengaged from the coaching relationship and made sure that he was supported by another coach that was independent. So that's one example, I'd say, around a normative function of supervision. How about you, Monica?
Yeah, that's a great example. And sometimes I use the example of, if you think of pictures on TV of bank robberies where you have these red lines for the vault, and sometimes the boundaries are so close, especially in organizations, that it's almost like people are navigating their way through these with dual relations and treble relationships. And so coaching supervision is a great place to come to disentangle the connections and see what's really ethical and what's healthy in terms of the work. And I think another area that's becoming more and more prevalent is where you have issues, for example, in relation to mental health. Sometimes people are having coaching, or they're sent for coaching, and they're also having counseling. And for coaches, it's really important to know, you know, whether to work with somebody when they have something going on in that way, or whether, you know, where the boundaries lie, and what it is they need to do around referring on. For example, if somebody comes to them and if you think of coachability factors where they're not really, they might be better served by another intervention. So this is becoming more and more prevalent in organizations and in society in general. So it's, again, coaching supervision is a place where you can come without judgment, with a sense of getting clarity and getting a clear, healthy way forward.
Great, thank you, thank you. And I think the whole thing around, often with ethical dilemmas, because they connect to our personal values. You know, that's why it's a process around becoming very self-aware, and I think supervision really enables us to untangle that, so we're able to contract more and more consciously, actually. So the next pillar is described as formative, and I'd say a generalization. So for a lot of new coaches, this is an area that they often focus on initially in their supervision and their conversations with their supervisor. So the formative aspects, it can be seen as, you know, me developing as a coach. So perhaps developing my skill set, my capability as a coach. So often, you know, in the early stages of supervision, I might be talking a lot about what I've done with a client, and was that the right thing, that sort of formative side in terms of growth that I'm experiencing as through the supervision process. And an example I would share, you know, quite recently I've been working with an experienced executive coach who is moving more into a team coaching environment. So he's using his supervision to really help him think about how he's making that shift. And actually, you know, often I'm supporting him thinking about how he needs to be as a team coach in that work. So around the skills and processes that he's using. How about you, Monica? Anything around the formative side?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, for example, sometimes I can bring in a perspective just by checking on, for example, asking how the coaching began, or the very first interactions can bring a lot of information that sometimes I notice that coaches disregard their gut messages when they're in a contracting situation, especially in tripartite situations where, for example, there might be an agenda in the organization in relation to the coachee, and the coach is so intent on doing a good job that they don't listen to their gut around what might be under the surface. So helping them to have another perspective, even very experienced people, and also bringing in models like, for example, transactional analysis. The drama triangle I find is hugely beneficial. It's very simple, but it just helps people to see the dynamics that are going on under the surface, and to unpick, some unconscious things like parallel process and transference and counter transference. So it's bringing in extra learning and awareness, I think, is probably the formative part.
Great, thank you. And then it's the final pillar when we think about the restorative nature, and you've already touched on this in terms of, you know, the coach being resourced by supervision. Um, you know, a colleague of mine, she used to describe that, you know, coaches walk around with Velcro shoes, you know, and often they're picking so much up from their clients, the client system that they're working in. You know, after a period of time, they could have difficulty walking because there's that sort of stuckness. So, you know, supervision is often that place where we can, you know, take those situations, and as you were saying, Monica, really unpick those as well. So how about from a restorative side, Monica? Are there any examples you would share?
Well, I'm thinking of two different kinds of situations. One, for example, I've worked with coaches in the last year or two who were going through some big personal stuff themselves. For example, real loss because somebody in their family has died, or that there's been a serious illness, and they're trying to navigate doing good work and staying fit for practice in the midst of, dealing with something like that. So supervision is a place to come and be resourced, and I suppose get a sense of what it is that they need to do for themselves, the self-care piece. Um, and also, that sense of sometimes coaches can lose their confidence and feel very battered by what can be going on in organizations. So it's kind of a place to let the layers fall and come back to, what's their purpose in the coaching, what what were they called in to do in the first place, and to untangle all of the other bits that seem to come in, so that they come back to a real sense of who they are as a coach and what they stand for, their deepest values. And so the restorative part can have different aspects to it.
Mm. Yeah, no, great. And an example I just had recently, I've been working with an internal team of coaches who are supporting leaders through a change they're also going through. So, that restorative side of the supervision, in terms of helping the coach sort of stay clean, actually, um, rather than sort of contaminated by the system that they're coaching somebody in.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm sort of hoping from this conversation so far and our descriptions, in terms of the purpose of supervision, you can start to sort of see what's resonating for you. Because again, this could be just a process that we have to do for our accreditation, or this could be a really, really critical piece of our ongoing professional development. This could be, a place where we could really make sense of who we are as a coach and the work that we love to do. This could be a place where we can really ensure that we're at our best to serve our clients. I'm really passionate about this because I meet so many coaches who really are just doing the bare minimum. And that may be because they haven't found the right supervisor. Um, but I really believe when you really connect to the value that supervision can bring to your work, it becomes something that you must have, in terms of really ensuring you're at your best as a coach. So before I preach any more, Monica, um, maybe let's just talk a bit about, so if that's what supervision is and the purpose, um, maybe let's just talk a bit about finding the right supervisor, because then we can talk a bit more about preparing and getting the most out of supervision
Hmm.
as well. So I'm just going to stop the slides being shared, but you okay talking to that?
Yeah, I mean, for my own process, it's actually quite intuitive. I remember, I've worked with different supervisors over time, and I I find that, sometimes you get to a level and you've outgrown the current relationship, and it's time, because I have a CPD plan and I know how I'm growing myself, and I share that with my supervisor. I know when we've reached a point that actually I need some new intervention. But whether you're an experienced coach or a new coach, it's really important to listen to your gut and to look for a range of, to check maybe two or three supervisors and have conversations with them, so that you're really getting a sense of, how would I feel working with this person? How would I feel bringing my vulnerable moments? Is this the kind of person that will I feel can hold me, if whether I'm doing great work and they can celebrate with me, or that, would I be able to open up if I feel I've got it wrong? So, you can, for example, practically, you can check on different websites, the AOCS, Association of Coaching Supervisors, or the EMCC website. But wherever you look, it's really the quality of the relationship is key. Do you want to add anything to that,
No,
Damien?
I agree. I think I would always say, have a try with somebody, have a meeting with them, but even just have a session if you really want to make sense of what it's like to work with them. Because like coaching, obviously this is a relational space, so we need to get the most from that. There's there's a thing to think about, I think, is about how close that supervisor is to you as well.
And
So,
actually, Darren is just raising a
okay.
question there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I used to work alongside a number of coaching supervisors, but again, I would never choose to work with them as my supervisor, even though they were fantastic. There was something about that closeness, and actually the objectivity in the space that I was looking for. So I think there's all these similar questions to boundaries that we would have in a coaching relationship around this. And I truly believe when you find the supervisors that's going to be right for you, you'll really understand that as well. Um, go on.
And Darren, just to answer your question, I mean, my sense is that it's really important to have the space as neutral and as clean as possible, because sometimes you may find that you want to talk about your line manager, and where do you go then, unless if that person is really open to having that conversation. Um, so my recommendation really is to create the kind of space where you can talk about anything, and quite often that means going to another space so that you can, if necessary, go back and have cleaner conversations. I'm just seeing another message coming in there. Oh yeah, that's from Peter. Um, mentioning about my mention of AOCS, the network of qualified and accredited supervisors. Um, yeah, the Association of Coaching Supervisors. Thanks for that, Peter.
Yeah, and I say it is a good resource because not only do you get an understanding of them and the way they work, there's also their fee rates and whether they work groups or one-to-one on there as well, because that's also another consideration. I think the only other thing I'd say to Darren is, that sort of vulnerability, can I really be open to somebody that may be evaluating my performance as well? I think that's the challenge with having a supervisor as a line manager as well. Um, so how about, so we've spoken a bit about finding the right supervisor, Monica. What about group versus one-to-one? What would you say about that?
In some cases, people have a range of types of supervision that they avail of. So some people might have individual and group. I have several clients who, are with me either for group or one-to-one, and they have another person for something else, or even peer supervision. It depends on your means. It depends on your needs in terms of supervision. But in terms of using it well, and I think that's what we're talking about here, my sense is that with one-to-one supervision, it's really good to, when you have that quality of relationship, to have a direction of growth that you're working towards and to discuss that with your supervisor. So, I contract with my supervisees around, what do you want to grow into as a coach? Is it that you want to be able to challenge more cleanly? Is it that you want to become, be able to have more access to certain ways of working? People who come to for the embodied and energetic aspects. Um, and in group supervision, because you'll be in a group with other people, the whole thing of partnership as learners is really important, and having a sense that your supervisor can hold the needs of each person, you and everybody, and the way the group is built, and the sense that all learning is valid, and even if people are at different levels, that's held and respected, and yeah. I'm seeing you nodding your head, Damien. So
I
do you want
agree.
to?
I agree. I was just going to say as well, in the group situation, for some coaches who may not be doing as much coaching, being in a group space where they can learn from other people's experiences as a coach is really valuable. But of course, the supervisor is role modeling
Exactly.
the whole time as well. So I think I just really want to say that this isn't about something I do because I've done so many hours of coaching. I think if you can hold a mindset, this is about my growth and development. I'll learn as much from the supervision space as I will even being in coaching. There's a different dimension that comes from the relationship and what you're learning from the supervisor and the way that they're role modeling the process with you.
And I might just say a little bit about peer supervision because, some organizations are even with their internal coaches, they're trying to set up peer supervision groups. And while that's great in terms of being able to bring and share the learning, I suppose it's a case of you don't know what you don't know. And if everybody's at the same level of learning, there will be blind spots and there'll be things that an experienced supervisor will have met and will have seen that um, they will be able to hold ethical issues. They'll be able to offer maybe different models and ways of handling difficult situations that a peer might not be able to offer you. So that's why it's good to have a range of different spaces so that, you're getting the kind of learning and experience that helps you to deepen your work.
Mm. Yeah, and in terms of, um, I suppose let's just talk, because I'm conscious of time, Monica. Let's just perhaps talk a bit about preparing for supervision to get the most out of it.
And
So,
actually, that was where I was coming to as well. But I do have a curiosity, Damien, about where people are at on the call and what questions might be there. So
mm,
would it be worth just for a moment checking in to see
yeah,
what questions are arising now?
yeah. So again, if there are questions arising, feel free to add those to the chat panel on anything that we've said so far, or it may be comments or reflection.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if there aren't, I suppose it takes us into a piece as well about preparing for supervision. So I know there are some experienced people on the line, so great opportunity to hear from you in terms of how do you prepare to get the most from supervision currently. So again, it'd be great just to see some reflections on the screen in terms of your experiences of preparing to get the most out of supervision.
Hmm. Don't be shy.
So it'd be good to see that. So Darren's been really honest there, which is great. I haven't been giving it the thought it needs. Paul, in terms of working with you, it's a commitment to supervision over a year. Can I move between Monica and Damien to get different perspectives, or is it better to stay with one? From Peter, I prepare by switching all tech off, then close my eyes and think about my supervisee and the strengths and issues. Yeah, thanks, Peter. So we'll come back to your question, Paul. I think in a moment, if that's okay. We're let's just build on this a bit, Monica, in terms of preparing for supervision. So, how about what thoughts you have around that?
One of the things that I notice with newer coaches, and particularly coaches who, are working in organizations, sometimes they're really pushed for time. And, part of my work is supporting them to develop their own reflective practice and to find a way to make space after a session and before a session so that they can really tune into themselves and tune into the client they're about to work with. And then to capture, it's not about writing loads of notes, it's about capturing the essence of what they noticed about themselves as the coach, what was coming up in them. Maybe was there some fear, was there some resistance, noticing what you did well as a coach in the session, noticing any moments of stuckness or a sense of maybe something that didn't go the way you expected, or maybe you tried using a model and you found it was a bit glitchy, but also noticing, celebrating what you've done well. I always start my sessions as a supervisor by inviting people into appreciative inquiry, because most people, it's interesting, go straight for, I didn't get this right and I'm not sure how to do that. So the first thing I do is say, okay, so what did you do well? what are you proud of? You know, what have you noticed yourself growing into? And then seeing what are the areas that I call it scratching my head about. You know, what are the parts that I seem to be carrying it around with me? So kind of noting down the things that you might like to explore in supervision. And for me, in supervision, I don't talk about problems or issues. I talk about what you don't know yet. So would you like to add something to that, Damien?
Yeah, I mean, I just think in terms of the coaches I'm supervising at the moment, I do see a real difference actually in terms of how they show up, and especially the coaches with a reflective practice. So the coaches that are, you know, creating some space after a session to really make sense of what was happening for them, not just, you know, what they did and what was agreed, but a real sort of understanding of what they were noticing about what was going on for them, what was going on for the coachee, etc. The way that they show up to supervision is very different, actually, because I usually encourage, you know, the people I'm supervising to reflect on the themes that they're experiencing. So Tony, who's online, has said about she finds the reflective exercises in my briefing pack for group supervision really useful, and that's really encouraging them to think about the time since we've met and what are the themes that are emerging in their work, because I'm really interested in their overall growth,
Yeah.
as well as obviously helping them with those sort of critical situations in terms of what they're meeting with their clients. So I think if they have a reflective practice, there's that ability to take that broader view and really understand their work and the themes that are emerging for them. And then I think it takes the supervision place away from just what do I do as a coach into, this is really about my development as a professional. So it's a depth, I think, increases with a reflective practice. And just because I'm saying that, if anybody is sort of thinking about, oh, how can I think about this a bit more, I'd say that the book I think it's on being a supervisee,
Yes, it's
Michael
great.
Carroll, there's some reflexive exercises in there which I really think are useful for coaches to work through. So that's always an encouragement for me to think about getting that book.
There's also a book by Eric Dehan called Being Supervised, which is, looks at the supervisee's perspective. And I was just going to add, Damien, people will have different ways of reflecting. And so sometimes, using creative ways, it might be writing or journaling, it might be even drawing pictures. I've started using a kind of a constellation. I look at all the different clients that I have, and I create a little picture and write the themes. And I kind of refer that back to myself and think, okay, so what's that saying about me and and my learning and my growth, and how is one reflected in the other? So, and as a supervisor for individuals, I offer pre-supervision and post-supervision reflective forms that help people to kind of get to the essence of what the nub of whatever the situation is, so that they can really crystallize what they need from the session and from working with me. So there'll be many ways of reflecting. Actually, Jackie Holder, I think, has created some lovely ways of reflecting. I think she has a website. I'm not sure, jackieholder.com maybe, but there are some lovely creative ways of reflecting. So it isn't one size fits all, but it is about how do you get to the essence of what's important for your growth and for how you do good work with your clients.
No, I agree. And I think, then I think the other thing, sorry, that was just coming up for me as you were talking. Some of the coaches I supervise will bring real recordings to the supervision as well. So obviously they've contracted with their client around voice recording, and they will bring sessions that we can work through together. And I'll say, in terms of getting the most out of supervision, of course, it's pushing that vulnerability a bit in terms of sort of leaning in. But I think, to sit down with a supervisor, I know from my own practice and actually be able to work through real material around what was going on for me, what I was doing, etc., can make a fantastic shift in terms of the practice. So I'd always encourage coaches to think about potentially doing some recording and bringing that in.
The other thing that I just add is that, I contract with my supervisees, whether it's group or individual, that we're in a living learning laboratory. So everything that comes up between me and the supervisee, we can talk about and we can bring in as part of the data of what might actually be going on between them and their client, because it's fascinating, sometimes what happens between the supervisor and the coach is actually being reproduced somewhere else, parallel process. And so the fact that they can talk safely to me about it means they can then go back and talk more confidently and be able to explore with more ease with their client. So I just wanted to add, that sense that it's a learning partnership.
No, great, Monica. And again, I'm conscious of time, but there are a couple of other questions that have come up that I just want us to cover. So in terms of Paul's question, in terms of working with you, is it a commitment to supervision over a year? Can I move between Monica and Damien to get different perspectives, or is it better to stay with one? So I suppose the question is, hey, now how long should I stay with a supervisor, or should I, I know you said about having a breadth, perhaps, peer, perhaps group, perhaps one-to-one, but yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. A few years ago, I was asked by a supervisee in another country. He wanted to work with me and with a good colleague of mine, and we had a tripartite conversation actually, where we agreed, he would work with. He wanted it in a particular way. So I think it depends on what the purpose is, and I think that's an important conversation to have. Whether it's about variety, whether it's about depth of perspective, but that, either contract separately with each person, but be really clear about what it's for, because the purpose will define how you work and how long you work. And generally in terms of length, I really tailor it to what the person needs and what's sustainable and feasible for them. Obviously, I'm not a lover of people just box ticking, but if they're in a situation where maybe they're not earning an awful lot of money, then I'm prepared to be flexible. But I'm really clear that it's about the depth of learning.
No, great. And I think the whole what purpose is a great question. So I've got a client at the moment we've just contracted for 4 sessions because he likes to change a supervisor every 4 sessions. It's his process. We're very conscious of that. I think for me, it's about the value you're getting from the supervisor. Are they able to really help you grow as a practitioner? And I think when it becomes too comfortable, I think is often the time to change to somebody else. I mean, people generally will come and work with me, a bit like with you of the embodiment piece. For me, it's more about the systemic work, because that's what my practice tends to focus on. So there's a specific reason why often a coach is working with me, and we know when we're coming to that point, actually. Yeah. So a couple of other questions. So Anne asked, what's your favorite technique, Monica, as a supervisor? I suppose it's more about anything else about how you work, or?
Well, it's interesting that use the word technique. My favorite technique is presence. I would have to say it's coming into presence together and allowing what wants to emerge. And I do use creative ways of working. I use cards quite a lot. I use some somatic and energetic exercises, but it's very much around the presence.
Yeah, no, great. And it resonates with me. I think for me, it's always about, so I work systemically only because I think that brings, especially with the complexity of what the systems that the coach is working in, I just think it brings a different lens in terms of looking at that. So that's why I often work that way as a supervisor. So we're sort of over time, so I really appreciate you staying with us and staying engaged with the session. I really hope that's giving you some thoughts to really think about in terms of getting the most from your supervisory relationship. If you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to get in contact
Mm.
with us, and would be happy to share any additional resources with you. Um, and yeah, I hope you can make our next webinar. And our next webinar is going to be in a couple of weeks, and it will be on the imposter syndrome. So I'll be talking to two experts in that area. One who's just finished her doctorate on the imposter syndrome. It's taking place on the 11th of March. So I really hope you can join us for that session. The recording for this session will be on our YouTube channel. So I hope you can, again, dial into YouTube to watch all the webinars there. And Monica mentioned Jackie Holder. She's actually ran a session for us on reflective writing. So,
Mm.
yeah, thanks for dialing in. Go well, and hopefully see you again. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your questions and your offerings.